Okay, we've just had a few more weeks left. This is our, I think, our last super formal lecture. It's your last lecture quiz. And our topic is kindness, forgiveness, and loving the world. And it's really a beautiful topic. There's some great information in here. I'm excited to share it with you. But before we do that, I'm just going to slip over here to the final and remind you. Now, you already decided which of these categories that you want to do your final on. You are welcome to change the category if you want to change the category, if you decided to change your mind. But this is what it is right now. And you already, so you identified that. Today, our job is to complete this week for your assignment. We're gonna take these atomic steps, these micro steps toward completing the final. So we're gonna do step 2 and 3 this week. So that's what your assignment is this week, is step 2 and step 3. And it says it in the assignment. So what you're going to do is, for step 2, is identify 5 insights that you think can help you, that you learned over the course of the semester, that you want to apply to your project. And step 3 is lay out the action steps you want to take on your project, right? So this is like a brainstorm, just a description of the action steps, right? So if you want to nurture relationships or expand your social circle, if that's the one you picked, then you'd identify 5 ideas from the lecture that the different lectures, 5 key points that you want to talk about or use, and then just kind of brainstorm what kind of steps you want to take, all right, to move forward on that, all right? What would be some specific things that you would do? All right. And if you have any questions about it, feel free to write me. There's a little bit more instructions on this in the assignment. So if we go to this week's mod, you'll see that we have, honoring your dreams. Wasn't Ikigai fun? Ikigai is fun. That's due tonight. So you can see here, this is the description of the final. And in this week's read and reflect, we're not doing generosity. You do these final instructions. So it's right there and guides you through. Okay. So that's the final. So now we'll continue with our lecture on loving the world. So kindness, as we all know, is a very, very beautiful thing. This is a brief video of a little boy giving a girl a baseball that he caught at a pro game. And of course, the mom's amazed. The kid caught it and turns around and gives it to a little girl. And all these moments really touch our heart and expand our hearts. So this is about cultivating kindness. It stimulates serotonin and reduces cortisol. So kindness lifts us and raises us. And I'm sure all of you have engaged in random acts of kindness at different times. And then simply seeing it has this effect on us, right? Like looking at pictures like this makes us feel kind of good, right? The dancing doctor is adorable. This is a Harvard-Yale study. Patients who had a doctor that they rated high on empathy had a 50% higher immune response, which is just absolutely fascinating. Okay, so it shows us the difference that this is the dancing doctor. I love this guy. And he does this with all his patients. He gets them all dancing. Until it's come to a time, me and you. Big up to this crew. Yeah, we like to keep it positive. You know how we do. Big up to this crew. Got props non-stopping, man. Love for you. Rising up like a moon, elevating the mood, uplifting attitudes. Cause that's what look at him make everybody laugh. But there's enough negativity going around with plenty room to improve. Yeah, sometimes we collide with stress and negativity. We always let it slide. It's an elevated vibe, so fly. We touch the sky every time we ride. Big up to this crew here. We like to keep it positive. You know how we do. Big up to this crew. From day one till it's come to a die, me and you. Big up to this crew. Yeah, we like to keep it positive. You know how we do. Big up. Non-stopping, man. Love for you. Now roll back time. Tell me what you find. You're gonna see the same sucker MCs on the sidelines. See these positive chemicals that he's inspiring in these children and the people that he works with is boosting their immune system, right? Doctor. So higher immune response when we keep our spirits up, right? So simple acts of kindness, improved immune function. So when we are kind to others, our immune system goes up. Woohoo! All right. And kindness is contagious. You know, this is an interesting image because there's this thing called the ripple effect. And the reason why there's a ripple effect is because our emotional, it sounds so woo, but it's really true. Our emotional energy actually extends about 3 to 7 feet from us. This is why we can pick up how people are feeling energetically. And those of you who are highly empathic, who have a lot of mirror neurons, you really know this to be true, right? So we have our emotions have a ripple effect on each other, and we pick up emotions from each other and we transfer emotions to each other. And the ones that are most contagious are anger and joy. So anger and laughter and anger to joy. So we have a ripple effect when you're kind to someone in the grocery store, when you give them a few moments of extra attention, they tend to be a little kinder to the next person they talk to, and so on. So we are influencing each other by cultivating, this is called the ripple effect of kindness, and it shows how we can end up having a huge effect on people around us through the simplest of acts, all right? You make a difference every single day to the person you've helped. So lifting our heart. Anger and hostility are contagious too. This is Bob Sutton from Stanford University. He's from Stanford. We have a book, author of a book called The No Asshole Rule. And Sutton talks about asshole poisoning, that if you sit within 25 feet of a toxic person, the odds that your behavior will become toxic goes up. Conversely, if you sit within 25 feet of a kind person, your kindness also goes up. At 150 feet, this effect goes down. So this, yes, amazing, isn't it? This close, there will be times, you know, somewhere at some point, sometimes close in, sometimes further away, we have someone who is still working to evolve and hasn't gotten that far yet. And so they are what Sutton might call, they can behave in a toxic way. So we can learn how to work with people like that. Are
sort of like kryptonite, that the more exposure you have to them, the closer you are to it, the worse it's going to be for you. And we can show this in the lab and field studies. And so finding ways to limit your exposure is important. Some of the most interesting studies, which have been around for a long time, going back to research by Tom Allen in the 70s at MIT, shows that essentially as you sit further away from somebody, further and further away, you have less communication with them and they have less influence on you. These studies have been going on for a long time. I mean, essentially his research shows that if you can get 150 feet away from someone, it's almost like they're in another country. Now we've got some newer studies of open office environments. And essentially what this group of researchers did out of Harvard at the time is where they were, was they looked to see the effect of a toxic person in an open office environment. And what they found was if somebody, so it could be you, is within 25 feet of a toxic person, number one, the odds they will become toxic themselves go up. Remember how it's contagious? And number two, the odds they are going to get fired also go up. So, and by the way, the more positive stuff just came out. They've got newer stuff that shows that if you sit next to a collaborative superstar, it's good for your career. So who you sit next to in an open office is very important.
This is the Asshole Survival Guide. There are books like this in case you come across people who are really difficult, how to cope with people who treat you like dirt, right? So you can learn management strategies, because we all get into a position where at some point in life where we have to deal with someone who's very difficult. These are 7 factors that lead people to act less than kind when they're around a lot of jerks, particularly raised in an environment like that, when they're in a position of wielding power over the others, especially when they came from a position of not having power, a competitive person who feels threatened and is at the top of a pecking order, working harder than others with a martyr attitude. Regularly, this should be not getting enough sleep, too much to do, think about, always in a hurry, and constantly referencing smartphone and engaging in social comparison also cultivates, say, the worst in us. So these are things that we can be aware of and try to help ourselves not go into a martyr mode, not engage in too much social comparison, because again, these are the kinds of things that bring out the worst in us. So are humans designed to be jerks? Is that how we are? So these are two questions that are on the quiz. What did Darwin think was the strongest instinct that humans have? Remember that Darwin is behind the theory of evolution. And who gives more, the wealthy or those with less? So we're going to watch this short video clip, 4 minutes. The UC Berkeley professor.
Think about the evolution of the human species from the standard framework of evolution, which really is about individual survival, competing, getting your genes to the next generation. One of the hardest questions within that framework is, why are people so frequently and routinely good and generous and sacrificing? And, most people think that Darwin had this idea of survival of the fittest, that really is the most ruthless and bloodthirsty who really thrive and survive. That is not Darwin's view of human evolution at all. He really felt that sympathy is the strongest instinct that humans have. Communities that have the most sympathetic members will flourish and raise the greatest number of offspring. That notion of Darwin's led to this sense that out of the vulnerability of our offspring emerged, first of all, social structures like cooperative caregiving, and then also physiological systems shaped by evolution to help us take care of the carriers of our genes, our offspring. We have learned from neuroscience down at UCLA that if you feel physical pain, a part of your brain lights up. And if I see you have that physical pain, the same part of my brain lights up. It's as if we're wired to have the same experience of other people. Empathy is this really complicated task. It really engages the frontal lobes, these newer regions of the cortex that are involved in more complex symbolic processes like language and imagining the future. Because empathy requires that you think there's someone else out there who has feelings and thoughts that may be different from mine. That's a really complicated cognitive achievement. In my lab, the Berkeley Social Interaction Lab, we showed images of prototypical suffering to our participants. They trigger massively powerful reactions of compassion. And what we found in the brain is that a very old part of the brain called the periaqueductal gray, which is common to mammals when they take care of things, lights up when you feel compassion. So that tells us compassion is really old in the nervous system, as Darwin speculated. My students and I got really interested in social class. What does it do to the human mind? Our lab and other labs are interested in something called the vagus nerve. It's the longest bundle of nerves in the human nervous system. In our research, compassion, the feeling of caring for someone in need, lower class individuals, if we show them images of suffering, they have a vagus nerve response. You don't see that in upper class individuals. It literally is a compassion that's produced by lots of growth. Next set of studies on charity. Who gives? Economic analyses would say, if I have a lot of money, it should be easy to give. If I have $900 in my bank account, giving away money it really matters. It matters what you put in your fridge. And in spite of that, what we find is lower class individuals give more. And this is replicated in studies of philanthropy. One of the things that this science tells us is there is enormous strength in these poorer communities of generosity and empathy that, many people in more privileged circumstances miss. It's strong community. Yeah, 60% of what we do is really about maximizing an individual's personal gratification and desire, just a classic survival of the most competitive. But 40% of the time, we're really doing things for other people. And we sacrifice and we risk exploitation and we still do it. And not only that, but it actually becomes personally fulfilling and inspiring to engage in that work. We find these secondary delights in acting on behalf of others. And I think that it really requires that we have to redefine human self-interest. You know, the great ethical traditions have always been encouraging this. And now we're seeing the science say, yeah, the brain really cares about other people.
That was Stoicism you saw a picture of there a moment ago, along with to the right of the Buddha. And you can see here that, and is at the top of the pecking order and wielding power over others. Both of these things reduce our empathy. So really important to be aware of, right? Fascinating. So the strongest human instinct, what is it? Sympathy, right? Not competition, sympathy. And who gives more? The wealthier, those with less. Because of that power thing, those with less give more. So this is really interesting. It's another quiz vid. This is Rutger Bregman, author of Humankind. And it's a related video on, are humans mostly selfish? So I don't know if any of you read that horrid book, Lord of the Flies. Well, the book wasn't horrid, but the story was horrid. Depressing story about the boys that get stranded on an island that turn against each other. So Bregman wanted to know, is that what would really happen? That fictional story, if that happened, would that, if you put a bunch of boys on a desert island, would they really end up turning against each other and end up in a warlike state? So he pursued that. And then here's the question on what enabled boys to survive. So look for the answer to that. And then third is, what does Homo puppy refer to, right? And what does it say about our species revolving? So here we can see a picture of a wolf and a picture of a dog. So all of those will be talked about in this 6-minute video. I think.
One of the most famous examples of this theory that people are fundamentally selfish in literature is the book Lord of the Flies by William Golding. So many people have read it. Millions of kids around the globe were basically forced to read it in school. I read it when I was 16 years old or 17, and I remember feeling quite depressed and cynical afterwards and thinking, well, no more Harry Potter for me. But it was while I was researching this book that I thought, has it ever happened that real kids shipwrecked on a real island? And how would they behave if something like that would happen? And so I went on this journey that started on an obscure blog where someone wrote that this actually happened near Tonga in the 60s. Tonga is an island group in the Pacific Ocean. And after a couple of months, I managed to track them down. So I found a guy named Peter Warner, who was an Australian captain, who was fishing in the vicinity of an island called Ata, a small island, basically a rock that sticks out of the ocean, in 1966, when suddenly he heard screaming. And he was looking through his binoculars and he saw these 6 kids, long hair, pretty wild appearance. What happens if you live on an island for a long time. And these kids came and said, you know what, we're part of this school in Tonga. We've been living here for 50 months. Can you bring us home? Now, Peter didn't believe it, so he called with the school and they said, yeah, actually, funerals have already been held. These are the real kids. So I spoke to Peter, the captain, and he put me in contact with his best friend, Mano Totau, who's one of the original Lord of the Flies kids. And so 50 years have passed since then, but they could still describe to me in vivid detail what happened and how these kids survived on this island for 15 months. Well, by working together, by cooperating. So they worked in teams of two to be on the lookout, to tend to the fire, to tend to the garden. And sometimes they did end up in fights. So then one of the boys would go to one side of the island, the other would go to the other side of the island, would cool off a little bit, come back and say sorry. That's how they kept going for months. So it wasn't easy, but they made it. And I think that can give us hope. And the thing is, if it would be a Hollywood story, a Hollywood movie, then people would say, well, this is very naive. That's not how kids would behave. It's very sentimental. But it's the real Lord of the Flies. The real Lord of the Flies is a story of friendship, of home, of working together. It's pretty much the opposite of what we've always heard. Now, I'm not saying it's a scientific experiment. It's obviously just an anecdote. But we humans tend to become the stories that we tell ourselves. And for decades, we've been telling ourselves this pretty cynical story of kids turning on one another. And I mean, what are kids supposed to learn from that? It's not a very happy message, is it? So I think that whenever any teacher says to the kids, well, you need to read Lord of the Flies, then let's also tell them about the one time that we know of in all of world history where a real kid shipwrecked on a real island, because that's a very different story. I think that most people are, in fact, pretty decent. And there's very strong evidence for this. It was already Charles Darwin a long time ago in the 19th century, you know, the father of evolutionary theory, who noticed that domesticated species have certain things in common. You know, they talk about domestication syndrome. So what does that mean? Well, domesticated species have thinner bones, smaller brains, they often have floppy ears, but most importantly, they just look a little bit childish. You know? It's as if they never really grow up. We now also know which genes are associated with domestication. And then the interesting thing is, if you indeed look at this list, and if you then look at humans, then the evidence is pretty clear. We all are also domesticated. And we did this in a process that biologists call survival of the friendliest. So for a very long time, it was actually friendliness that helped you to survive. You know, imagine living in the Ice Age, being a nomadic hunter-gatherer. What did you need most? Well, you needed friends. You weren't going to survive without friends because, you know, there could be a tough day, you could get an injury or something like that, and then you really needed those friends. So friendliness was sort of an evolutionary advantage, an evolutionary adaptation. And there was a very strong pressure, selection pressure, so that we became friendlier and friendlier and friendlier. And you can even see this within our bodies. So if you compare bodies of humans from 50,000 years ago and 40 and 30 and 20 and 10,000 years ago, you just see that people look more puppyish than we used to, right? So I call this Homo puppy. We've evolved to become more puppyish. We just look friendlier. You know, we have these smaller skulls, for example. And we also developed the unique ability to blush. I think that's really striking and fascinating that we're one of the only species in the whole animal kingdom with the ability to blush. We involuntarily give away our feelings in order to establish trust. And we also have unique eyes. So this is what we call cooperative eyes. As you can see, I have white sclera, you know, the white around our irises. Now, that doesn't make me unique. All humans have that. But it makes us unique as a species because all other primates don't have it. You know, they have dark around their eyes. So that makes it very hard to track their gazes, to follow their gazes. It makes it hard to see what they're looking at. It's as if other primates are a little bit like poker players wearing shades, or mafiosi, you know, wearing shades. And we are just an open book for everyone. We just give away what we're looking at to each other. And again, that helps us to establish trust. I mean, think about what love and romance would be if we can't look each other in the eye. If you want the evidence that we have really evolved to cooperate as a species, just look in the mirror and you see it staring right at you.
Look at these videos. How to spot high conflict people before it's too late. How high conflict personalities capture high office. That means like senior positions, senior political and corporate positions. So this week's discussion is about watching a video on one of these topics so that you can gain the information for dealing with those kinds of situations. But wasn't that cool? Isn't that cool? And so different. I mean, I remember when I was in college, the whole thing was about, you know, competition. And now what we realize is that no, it's actually the fundamental force that has enabled us to thrive as humans and connects us and working together is cooperation. And And this whole puppy thing is really cute. Homo puppy. So you heard him talk about the oversimplification of the interpretation of survival of the fittest. What that doesn't mean, it does not mean survival of the strongest. It means survival of the best match to the environment. The best match to the environment. You know, we can see this in the job environment too, right? If we're a person who likes a lot of order, if we like to be relatively quiet, if we're not exuberant, if we're not the life of the party kind of person, then we will probably have a good fit in a bank, right? But a highly exuberant person might not have a good fit in the bank because they want a lot of command and control in a bank environment, right? So that's the idea of fit. That's what he means by fittest, not strongest, but the best match for whatever the environment is holding. Okay. So it's the cooperation, it's the goodness. Now, in addition to the 7 factors that Sutton found make people more vulnerable to behave in dominating and unkind ways, we have some really old wiring that sets us up to organize into us versus them groups. And this is one of the biggest things that we're grappling with right now. In fact, we're kind of going through the transition because we've essentially been tribal for all of human history until about now. So we've been locked in the us versus them orientation. And it's a very organized way of thinking. You can just think about you and your friends are us, and then everybody else is a them. And we have a different way of thinking about the people that are in what are called our in-group, the in-group of us, compared to the out-group of them. We always tend to think that the in-group of us is a little bit better. And we're wired to do this. Primates are wired to this. In fact, we're the only primate. We are the only primate that does cross-tribal alliances. We're the only primate alive that does cross-tribal alliances. Chimps stay within their tribe. They might take one outcast in or a new female to mate with in, but they don't merge tribes. They don't intertribal communicate, okay? So, and connect and organize. So this us versus them thinking is one of the cognitive bias that's sort of wired into us, where we're a little bit more critical of the people in the them group. And we also tend to, if they make a mistake, we think it's because they're bad, innately not so good. Whereas if somebody in our in-group makes a mistake, we think it's because of circumstances. They were having a really hard time. We make excuses, right? We're quick to make excuses for those in our in-group, but not for those in our out-group. For them, we think it's because of their character isn't as developed as it needs to be, right? So this is a bias. It's a mistake in thinking, and something we're going to need to learn to transcend, and we are learning to transcend it. Some of the things that are helping us do that is, I think, the picture of the Earth from space is one thing that began to get us thinking about the wholeness of the Earth and that we're one people on one planet. The World Wide Web does that because it creates the interconnected web. So your generation, you are the ones that will be marshaling this into another level of consciousness that humans haven't been, because we're forced to survive. And this is a wonderful video called The Empathic Species. It's a little bit longer, but this video, and it moves really fast. This video helps explain how we are able as a species to get 2 tribes, since we're wired to cooperate within the tribe but compete between tribes. This is sort of the primate wiring that we've inherited. How are we managing to develop cooperation between tribes? How are we managing to do that? So let's take a look at the empathic species. Great.
In the last 10 years, there's been some very interesting developments in evolutionary biology, neurocognitive science, child development research, and many other fields, which is beginning to challenge some of these long-held shibboleths that we've had about human nature and the meaning of the human journey. But there is another frame of reference emerging in the sciences, which is quite interesting. It really challenges these assumptions. And with that, the institutions that we have created based on those assumptions, our educational institutions, our business practices, our governing institutions, et cetera. Let me take you back to the early 1990s.
Okay. So he's saying that the institutions we've created have been based on the old assumption that cooperation is the number one driving force. I mean, competition is the number one driving force. And now we've learned that cooperation is. So social scientists have with the research in the last 25 years. So the institutions like capitalism, for example, favoring competition based on competition. I mean, one of the main arguments for capitalism as an economic system is that competition is a primary motive. Now, this isn't saying that capitalism isn't bad. There's some very interesting things that capitalism does that's positive, but it's complicated, right? So we've got to look at, there's nuances to it. So this helps us.
Sleepy little laboratory in Parma, Italy, and scientists had a MRI brain scanning machine on a macaque monkey as the macaque monkey was trying to open up a nut. They wanted to see how the neurons would light up. So the monkey's trying to open up the nut, the neurons light up. And just by serendipity, and this is how science sometimes happens, a human being walked in the laboratory. I don't know if it was by mistake, and he was hungry. He saw the nuts and opened up one of the nuts and tried to crack it open. The macaque monkey was totally shocked because who was this invader in his laboratory? And he didn't move. He just gazed at this human trying to open up the nut, just like he had done a few seconds earlier. And then the scientist looked on the MRI brain scanner. The same exact neurons were lighting up when he observed the human being opening the nut as when the monkey opened the nut. And the scientists had not a clue as to what this was. They thought the MRI machine had broken. They then began to put MRI brain scanning machines on other primates, especially chimpanzees with our big neocortex. Then they went to humans. And what they found over and over again is something called mirror neurons. And that is that we are apparently soft-wired, some of the primates, all humans. We suspect elephants. We're not sure about dolphins and dogs. We've just begun. But all humans are soft-wired with mirror neurons so that if I'm observing you, your anger, your frustration, your sense of rejection, your joy, whatever it is, and I can feel what you're doing, the same neurons will light up in me as if I'm having that experience myself. Now, this isn't all that unusual. We know if a spider goes up someone's arm and I'm observing it going up your arm, I'm going to get a creepy feeling. We take this for granted, but we are actually soft-wired to actually experience another's plight as if we are experiencing ourselves. But mirror neurons are just the beginning of a whole range of research going on in neuropsychology and brain research and in child development that suggests that we are actually soft-wired, not for aggression and violence and self-interest and utilitarianism, that we are actually soft-wired for sociability, attachment, as John Bowlby might have said, affection, companionship, and that the first drive is the drive to actually belong. It's an empathic drive. What is empathy? It's very complicated. When little babies enter nursery and one baby cries, the other babies will cry in response. They just don't know why. That's empathic distress. It's built into their biology. Around 2.5 years of age, a child actually can begin to recognize himself in a mirror. That's when you begin to mature empathy as a cultural phenomenon. And that is once a toddler can identify themselves, then they know that if they're observing someone else have a feeling, they know that if they feel something, it's because they're feeling it because someone else has it. They're two separate beings. Selfhood goes together with empathic development. Increasing selfhood, increasing empathic development. Around 8 years of age, a child learns about birth and death. They learn where they came from, that they have a one and only life, that life is fragile and vulnerable, and one day they're going to die. That's the beginning of an existential trip. Because when a child learns about birth and death and they have a one and only life, they realize how fragile and vulnerable life is. It's very tough being alive on this planet, whether you're a human being or a fox navigating the forest. So when a child learns that life is vulnerable and fragile and that every moment is precious and that they have their own unique history, it allows the child then to experience another's plight in the same way. That other person or other being, could be another creature, has a one and only life. It's tough to be alive, and the odds are not always good. So if you think about the times that we've empathized with each other or fellow creatures, it's always because we felt their struggle. We have the width of death and empathy and the celebration of life. And we show solidarity with our compassion. Empathy is the opposite of utopia. There is no empathy in heaven. I guarantee you, I'll tell you before you get there. There isn't any empathy in heaven because there's no mortality. There's no empathy in utopia because there is no suffering. Empathy is grounded in the acknowledgement of death and the celebration of life and rooting for each other to flourish and be. It's based on our frailties and our imperfections. So when we talk about building an empathic civilization, we're not talking about utopia. We're talking about the ability of human beings to show solidarity, not only with each other, but our fellow creatures who have a one and only life on this little planet. We are Homo empathicus. So here's the question. We know that consciousness changes in history. The way our brain is wired today is not the way a medieval serf's brain would be wired, and their brain wouldn't be the same as the wiring of a forager hunter 30,000 years ago. So the question I asked at the beginning of this study 6 years ago is, how does consciousness change in history? Because I wanted to imagine the following proposition. Is it possible that we human beings who are soft-wired for empathic distress, is it possible we could actually extend our empathy to the entire human race as an extended family, and to our fellow creatures as part of our evolutionary family, and to the biosphere as our common community? If it's possible to imagine that, then we may be able to save our species and save our planet. And when I say to you tonight, if it's impossible to even imagine that, I don't see how we're going to make it. Empathy is the invisible hand. Empathy is what allows us to stretch our sensibility with another so that we can cohere in larger social units. To empathize is to civilize. To civilize is to empathize. With forager hunter societies, communication only extended to the local tribe and shouting distance. Everyone over in the next mountain was the alien other. So empathy only extended to blood ties. When we went to the great hydraulic agricultural civilization, script allowed us to extend the central nervous system and to annihilate more time and space and bring more people together. And the differentiation of skills and the increasing selfhood not only led to theological consciousness, but empathy now extended to a new fiction. And that is, instead of just associating with one's blood ties, we detribalized and began association based on religious ties. So a new fiction, Jews start to see all other Jews as extended family and empathize with Jews. Christians start to see all other Christians as extended family and empathize with Christians. Muslims, the same. When we get to the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution, and we extend markets now to larger areas and create a fiction called the nation state. And all of a sudden, the Brits start to see others in Britain as extended family. The Germans start to see Germans as extended family. The Americans as Americans. There was no such thing as Germany. There was no such thing as France. These are fictions. But they allow us to extend our family so that we can have loyalties and identities based on the new complex energy communication revolutions we have that annihilate time and space. But if we have gone from empathy in blood ties to empathy in religious associational ties to empathy based on national identification, is it really a big stretch to imagine the new technologies allowing us to connect our empathy to the human race writ large in a single biosphere? On what reason would we stop here at the nation-state identity and only have ideological empathy or theological-based empathy or tribal-based blood tie empathy? We have the technology that allows us to extend the central nervous system and to think viscerally as a family, not just intellectually. When that earthquake hit Haiti and then Chile, but especially Haiti, within an hour, the Twitters came out, and within 2 hours, some cell phone videos, YouTube, and within 3 hours, the entire human race was in an empathic embrace coming to the aid of Haiti. If we were, as the Enlightenment philosophers suggested, in materialistic, self-interested, utilitarian, pleasure-seeking, it couldn't account for the response to Haiti. Apparently, 175,000 years ago in the Rift Valley of Africa, there were about 10,000 anatomically modern human beings walking the grasslands, our ancestors. The geneticist located one database woman. It's a database line. Apparently, her genes passed to everyone in this room tonight. The other ladies didn't make it. Gets even more strange. They located a single male. This is a database line for genetics. They call him the Y chromosome Adam. Apparently, a fairly potent guy. His genes passed to everyone in this room. So here's the news. 6.8 billion people at various stages of consciousness. Theological, ideological, psychological, dramaturgical. We're all fighting with each other with different ideas about the world. And guess what? We all came from two people. The Bible got this one right. We could have come from many, but the point is we have to begin thinking as an extended family. We have to broaden our sense of identity. We don't lose the old identities of nationhood and our religious identities and even our blood ties, but we extend our identities so we can think of the human race as our fellow sojourners and our other creatures here as part of our evolutionary family, and the biosphere as our community. We have to rethink the human narrative. If we are truly Homo empathicus, then we need to bring out that core nature. Because if it doesn't come out and it's repressed by our parenting, our educational system, our business practice and government, the secondary drives come: the narcissism, the materialism, the violence, the aggression. If we can have a global debate, let it start here from the British Royal Society for the Arts, which apparently you're doing, to begin rethinking human nature, to bring out our empathic sociability so that we can rethink the institutions of society and prepare the groundwork for an empathic civilization.
Pretty amazing, huh? Isn't it interesting to see how our
we have to rethink the human narrative.
How our consciousness evolved, you know, and developed from the small tribal groups to expanding to religious ties. So we have larger groups to expanding to nation state tribes, and then we have the World Wide Web. And you know, surprisingly, the pandemic is another thing that has moved everybody's minds to thinking about everybody in the world. So loving the world involves having an expanded view of us. Remember, one of the earlier speakers said that what we create, what we're able to envision. So it's very interesting that we're now able to envision, you're the generation that's going to be able to envision a whole world. That's what will get rid of war. So it's striking to see how simple it can be to add to the lives of other people, even just by offering a little praise or giving your full attention for longer time than usual. And really dropping in and giving our attention is one of a great, great gift. This is by Rick Hansen, the author of our text. So empathy is when we feel with another person. We have compassion, caring for how they feel. Compassion tends to be defined as caring for the relief of another's suffering. So empathy inspires compassion. We can get emotionally burned out if we over empathize, if we feel too much for them, but we can feel boundless amounts of compassion, the desire to relieve suffering. So it's nice to switch empathy over to compassion. So kindness does not mean to be a doormat. So this is the part about kindness and assertion. Each of us matters, and some of us are over empathetic, and some of us want to cultivate more empathy, right? So if you're over empathetic, if you tend to be really strong on empathy and you may need to cultivate some more assertion. So I think, is this an article? Yeah, this is an article on how to be a lion. Oh, I'll have to figure out how to fix that link. This is how to cultivate positive assertion. So if you're one of the persons who needs to if you already have plenty of empathy and need to cultivate more assertion, that article will be good. I'll find it and fix the link. I saw a really classic incident. There was a really interesting moment at, it was just like a micro moment and totally classic at our Mother's Day event. One of my nieces has a 2-year-old daughter, and her I think she's older than that. She's like 3. And one of the things, she was twirling this thing and it hit the edge of the table. She was twirling this cup with this little handle, this, cloth handle. And it hit the table, and her mom said, don't twirl the table, don't twirl the cup. But what the little girl did instead was move a little bit further away from the table and kept twirling the cup, right? So now you've got a power struggle. And these power struggles happen all the time because the mom said, don't do it. She still did it. She figured out that the problem was hitting the table, and so she was trying a new solution. Now, she's too young to be able to articulate in that moment, how about if I just do this? So instead she just tried it, right? Now, the parent the mom could assume that she is bucking her authority and really squashed down. But we don't, if we have to walk the balance between honoring the autonomy of another person and civilizing them at the same time. So we have to pick our battles, right? And some of them we can step back from. So there's several ways you could see responding to that. One would be, I told you to not do that. You disobeyed. You're going to get punished. Another would be, I see you figured out another way of solving the problem to not twirl the cup. To twirl the cup further away from the table. That was pretty clever of you to figure that out. But I do need to trust you. We need to trust each other. I need to trust that you'll do what I say. And I need to come through for you. You need to come through for me. So next time, tell me that's what you're discovering. Ask if you can, hey, it looks like I'm not hitting the table. Can I do this? Okay, do you see the difference between gentling that power struggle and doing more of our kind of restorative kind of communication? All right, so that's what this is about. Noticing when those power struggles surface in your life. And, sometimes we just react, and that's fine because we're human, but we can step back and reflect on how we can work with those power struggles more skillfully. So now we're going to look at forgiveness and letting go. When we get hurt and we carry the hot coal of that hurt around with us, like as a grudge, this is partly because the negativity bias of the brain grabs hold of it, makes it easy to ruminate on us, but the coal is burning us, right? So the idea is that we want to learn the lesson and let go of the pain, right? So forgiveness is learning the lesson and let go of the pain. And the lesson may be that this person has not evolved to the point yet where they won't do something hurtful. And we need to be aware that this person is likely to do something hurtful, and we need to find ways to be there for ourselves, come through for ourselves, support ourselves through the process. So forgiveness means dropping the coal. It does not mean dropping the lesson. We hold the lesson, we drop the coal. All right, so that's what forgiveness is. It doesn't mean letting the other person, like pretending that the other person isn't who they are. It doesn't mean being naive. All right. And forgiveness heals our body because we're not ruminating in caustic emotions, right? So we'll look at this short video on forgiveness heals the body. And we're going to look at what happened to people's blood pressure when they thought about how they had been wronged. And you can just tell how that feels within yourself. Forgiveness reduces the desire to do blank, and people who held on to a grudge felt more blank. So those are the questions that will be answered through this video clip on how forgiveness influences our body.
Nelson Mandela may have passed on, but he leaves a legacy of love and forgiveness. Is there a psychological benefit to that? Science investigates. Hey everyone, Trace here for DNews, looking into the science of forgiveness. Humans are a complex mix of emotional states which all evolved to serve a purpose. For a long time, forgiveness was thought to be in the realm of religion and philosophy. But science has begun to study the idea of forgiveness and the psychological and health impacts of letting go of internalized conflict. During apartheid, Nelson Mandela was imprisoned for nearly 3 decades. When he was finally freed in 1990, he refused to hold on to anger or resentment toward his oppressors, saying, "As I walked out the door toward the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison." One could say that Nelson Mandela is self-actualized, which is described in psychology theories as what a man can be, he must be. One of the keys of this is to forgive. Mandela was a preacher of love and forgiveness. Writer William Hazlitt believes without someone to fight, without someone contrary, humans wouldn't survive. We need a villain to have a hero. Even in the Roddenberryan utopia of Star Trek, humans still have contrary feelings. But though it's difficult, why is forgiving important, scientifically speaking? Remember, We're animals. We evolved forgiving because those who were able to forgive were able to produce more offspring. A psychologist from Duke University writes humans were unable to rely on their speed, their fighting skill, their strength, their size to defeat predators. Instead, they had to form cooperative groups, and thus natural selection tipped toward those who were accepting, supportive, and helpful. The study of forgiveness is relatively new, and so far science has shown forgiveness has a genetic component, but can also be taught and passed through social interaction. When people were asked by researchers to think about a time they suffered a wrong, their heart rate, muscle tension, and blood pressure all increased. They reported feeling less in control of themselves and were under significant stress. Forgiveness alleviates those problems and allows the human animal to heal. Psychologists define interpersonal forgiveness as a shift in thinking, where the desire to do harm lessens and the desire to benefit the relationship increases. A study funded by the John Templeton Foundation found that when people were able to forgive, they had lower resting blood pressures and they could more easily cope with chronic pain, while patients holding on to anger and resentment experienced aggravated pain. Another study in Michigan found those who refused to forgive had higher levels of cortisol, a major stress hormone produced by the adrenal gland and a natural steroid, while the Mayo Clinic says those who practice this shift in thinking have lower incidences of depression, better functioning immune systems, and nervous systems. They also had lower rates of heart disease. Ultimately, outside of direct biological benefits, social science done by Stanford University indicates forgiveness can help interpersonal relationships flourish. Taken together, forgiveness lets the body physically relax and mentally heal, which I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty great. No wonder Mr. Mandela lived for so long and accomplished so much. His body was content, relaxed, and stress-free. Have you ever had trouble forgiving? What did you do to finally let go? Tell us in the comments below the video, and thank you for watching D News Today. Subscribe for more.
Okay, so if you want to read those comments, you can go back to this link. So the scorpion and the frog is a little story that says forgiveness includes holding on to the wisdom. And in the scorpion and the frog, a scorpion needs a ride across the river, and he asks the frog for a ride, and the frog says, "No, you'll bite me." And the scorpion says, "No, I won't. No, I won't." And the frog says, "Oh, okay," gives him a ride. And of course, the scorpion bites him midway. And the frog said, "Why did you bite me? You said that you wouldn't bite me." And the scorpion says, "I'm a scorpion." All right. So the lesson of this is a hard one. And it's that we need to bring wisdom to the situation and pay attention. And because we have let go doesn't mean that the other person has learned better behavior, right? So we want to stay on top of that and aware of that. That doesn't mean that people don't change, because they do change. I'm sure you guys have all changed multiple times in your life. There's probably ways that you wish people were aware of how you changed and would notice it more, right? Because a lot of times it can take a while for the people in our lives to catch on to the fact that we've changed in one way or another. So we do change, and even our species has changed over time. We've become more homo puppy. And because of neuroplasticity, we can decide to cultivate changes, to nurse and grow certain changes in ourselves, like shifting to a green state. So some of the people, some of the time, they may have changed, the people who've hurt you, and other the times they haven't. So it's wise to be mindful, just aware of how people are. I remember years ago, I had a situation where I was with a boyfriend who had an affair. This was when I was 23. And for a while after that, I went to a therapist and I said, you know, I can't trust anybody anymore. And this therapist said to me, "Oh, Linda, you can always trust everybody." And I literally was flipping him off under the table. I'm like, "What? No, you can't." And he just stared at me. And then finally he said, to be exactly who they are. You got to pay attention to who people are. They will reveal themselves to you in terms of how they describe people, what their relationships are like, how they talk about things. And you want to pay attention to how they really are, not just how you want them to be. That was a very powerful lesson for me, to see realistically what is before me and taking the data about it, so I understand what I'm dealing with from a realistic place. Eckhart Tolle describes it beautifully. I think he says it best when he says, well, Maya Angelou said that people are doing the best they can, and when they know how to do better, they do better. And that's one way of thinking about it. And I think that that is very much true. Eckhart Tolle describes it as people are operating from the level of consciousness where they are. And we do not have time to watch this video, but basically what he's saying there is that, well, he's actually responding to someone who went through a situation similar to me, a situation of betrayal, which is a tough one. It's a very difficult one, and helping them realize that that person acted from the state of consciousness where they are. And it's very soothing talk to listen to help process going through something that's difficult, where we've been hurt, right? These are the stages that I'm sure you've heard of grief, of letting go of stuff. And we can go through these, in different order, and we can go through them quickly and we can go through them slow. So the denial, anger, depression, bargaining, and finally acceptance, right? And sometimes when we get over something like a former relationship or something, one day we may be bargaining, gosh, if only I did this or this, maybe it could have worked. And another day we might be accepting, and another day depressed. And it goes through this process, and we just need to nurture ourselves through it as best we can. These are the stages of grief, and it's more of a wiggly line going back and forth than it is a linear line. But it's the process that's sort of built into us to let go of a disappointment. When we sense it's time to let go, because we all feel that, we can all feel that there's a point where we've processed the frustration and unhappy emotions enough, and it's time to release. Okay, we can begin the process of freeing ourselves from carrying around the hot coal. And on the next few pages are video links to resources that touch on all kinds of areas of mental health awareness, including forgiveness. So for this week's discussion, you're encouraged to check out one of these that is interesting to you, right? One that is most meaningful to you. And you can always save these PowerPoints if you want to be able to refer to a different one later. This is a wonderful video on the process of letting go and forgiving. Some of the steps that you can go through to release holding on to something. And it's really good. The 3 Key Elements is one of my favorite counseling websites. This is a video on letting go grudges and hurt. How many people does forgiveness take? Because we're running out of time. It takes one, and just you. It doesn't take the other person. And does forgiveness mean excusing or forgetting what happened? No, not at all. Okay, it does not. This is how to let go of a grudge. This is another great therapy channel. These are therapists that have channel. The 3 Key Elements is a therapist channel, and he's absolutely wonderful. And they have many topics. They'll touch on lots of different topics, these therapists, right? So you can look at the different, like how to deal with a bully, steps on becoming a stronger empath. So the 2 different sides, right? Assertion and empathy, how to rebuild lost trust in a relationship. And there are many videos here, right? And these are ones that I respect. The ones that I'm connecting you with here on this slideshow. Are ones that my go-tos. And then Christian Conte is another one of my favorites, How to Let Go of a Grudge, for letting go of resentments, anger, and hurt. He's absolutely wonderful. How to Forgive When You Can't Forget. Marie Forleo wrote the book, Everything is Figure-Outable, which is, I think, a wonderful theme for our time right now, because so many people are talking about the major problems that we're facing as a culture and as a species. And I think they're figure-outable. I totally agree with Marie's point of view. So you'll find one of these will click for you, and they have lots of other subjects that they cover. One of the things that I'm trying to do, I turn to these resources all the time. 3 or 4 times a week, I go to one of these web links and listen to a talk on something that helps me move through the world a little bit better, lifts me up to a little bit higher level of being. So I'm sharing these with you in hopes that you'll find that as well. And this is Katie Morton. She's another mental health therapist. So you've got 4 great sources here. Katie is fantastic. She's a therapist with an excellent on all kinds of YouTube topics. So this one is on forgiving ourselves. She does new videos every Monday and covers a lot of topics. If we don't forgive ourselves regularly, we may build up a wall between ourselves and others. So how to forgive ourselves and move on. So for this week's discussion, you're encouraged to pick one of those videos to watch and then share what you thought about it with colleagues, right? From any one of those pages. This is a quote from George Sanders, a speech he gave about how kindness isn't always easy when it expands to include everything. And just like repairing relationships, forgiveness and letting go can become regular practices that we become comfortable with. I used to have like admitting that I did something wrong or somebody trying to point out that I did something wrong used to be a really sensitive hot button for me. It's like I would get very defensive really fast. So I really worked on this. I noticed that my sister, for example, she was a model for me, that she didn't seem to be too bothered. She would just be, oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, you're right about that. I guess I could work on that. You know, she sort of took it in stride. And so I've been practicing taking it in stride, which has been really helpful to me. It's like my defensiveness about this, which also means my self-acceptance is going up, right? Because I'm accepting that it's okay. I'm not freaking out inside that I may have something that's not perfect about me, right? And I think that the oops, my bad is a really sweet little phrase. And so let's close with this short story about kindness. It's just 2 minutes. It's by that George Sanders that did that quote about kindness isn't easy. And it's just a sweet animation.
I'd say as a goal in life, you could do worse than try to be kinder. In 7th grade, this new kid joined our class. In the interest of confidentiality, her name will be Ellen. Ellen was small, shy. She wore these blue cat's eye glasses that at the time only old ladies wore. When nervous, which was pretty much always, she had a habit of taking a strand of hair into her mouth and chewing on it. So she came to our school and our neighborhood and was mostly ignored, occasionally teased. Your hair tastes good? That sort of thing. I could see this hurt her. I still remember the way she'd look after such an insult. Eyes cast down, a little gut kicked, as if, having just been reminded of her place in things, she was trying as much as possible to disappear. After a while, she'd drift away, hair strands still in her mouth. Sometimes I'd see her hanging around alone in her front yard as if afraid to leave it. And then she moved. That was it. One day she was there, next day she wasn't. End of story. Now, why do I regret that? Why, 42 years later, am I still thinking about it? Relative to most of the other kids, I was actually pretty nice to her. I never said an unkind word to her. In fact, I sometimes even mildly defended her. But still, it bothers me. What I regret most in my life are failures of kindness. Those moments when another human being was there in front of me, suffering, and I responded sensibly, reservedly, mildly. Or to look at it from the other end of the telescope, who in your life do you remember most fondly, with the most undeniable feelings of warmth? Those who were kindest to you, I bet. But kindness, it turns out, is hard. It starts out all rainbows and puppy dogs and expands to include, well, everything.
Okay, adapted from the graduation. And then try the kindness challenge. So the kindness challenge is a really, in fact, I should put this in the assignment. But the kindness challenge is really cool. Oops.
What's up, everybody? I have been a therapist for almost 20 years. I have
Dr. Christian Conte, one of the therapists that is listed on those slides. So do one deliberately kind thing each day for 7 days for 7 different people, one of them an anonymous act. So it's one a day for a different person each day. One of them that you don't get credit for. Okay, so it's anonymous. You do something for somebody and they don't know about it. And then you can also do the kindness challenge with one other person. For 30 days, say nothing negative about that person to them or another person. This is a great healing, and this would be a great project to either one of these would be a great project for a final project. Every day, find one positive thing you can praise or affirm, and every day do one small act of kindness or generosity for them. These can be little things, make them a cup of coffee, write them a little note, give them a hug, can be little things, right? So either of these are wonderful final project examples. And expand your love for the world. This is what's called a meta loving kindness meditation. And what you do with this meditation, and this will guide you through it, 10 minutes. And it's one of the kinds of meditation that helps us feel connected with others and inspires goodwill within ourselves. It's one of the kinds of meditation that it's called metta, which means loving kindness. And it's one of the kinds that has been researched a lot and shows very strong positive results in improving people's sense of well-being. So this is a 10-minute guided meditation. And what they do is they guide you to say these phrases to yourself. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I feel safe. And may I live with ease. Actually, usually starts with may I be safe. May I be healthy, may I be happy, and may I feel at ease. And then you think about somebody that you care about and you reflect on them as you say the phrases, may you feel safe, may you feel happy, may you be healthy, and may you live with ease. And then you would extend it larger to say a group, your family, you could imagine your community, right? And you say the loving kindness phrases to the group. You might think of somebody that you don't get along with that well, that you maybe have a little tension with, and you would be amazed at how much these loving kindness phrases can gentle your next interaction with that person, even by just saying them within the meditation within yourself. And then you can extend it to the world, right? So, and then bringing it back to yourself. So it starts with you and then extends out in various ways. And that's our last slide, everybody. We're running a little bit late if we went to 1:15, right on time if we went to 1:30. I see you have a wonderful companion, Kayla. How beautiful. And it's so great to see you all today. Thank you for coming. If you could close by putting in the chat your favorite thing from today's lecture, that will be our closing quiz question. We looked at lots of things. The kid giving the baseball, look at the mom amazed at that kind act. Even watching kindness makes us feel good. So you're feeling low, turn on those puppy videos, right? We can all be a dancing doctor in our own way for the people in our lives. It boosts immunity and well-being and serotonin. Kindness is contagious. It has a ripple effect and influences quite a few people. Anger and hostility are also contagious. So we looked at asshole poisoning and techniques for working with toxic people as a skill we want to develop, right? Are humans meant to be jerks? No, it turns out we're wired for connection. And you'll see that everywhere, from people cooperating on the road to the kindness in the grocery store. It's just everywhere. So start noticing the connection and cooperation that we do so remarkably well as a species. And this is the Lord of the Flies video with the boys stranded on the desert island, actually didn't turn on each other, but actually worked together to make it through. And the idea of homo puppy, which is, well known in the sciences. So survival of the fittest means survival of the best match, not the strongest. Right? And it was the best match for us to cooperate. We looked at the vulnerability we have to us versus them thinking, and that we want to work to transcend that vulnerability. And one of the ways that we're doing it is through empathy and we're extending empathy. It's slowly extending beyond the tribe, and then it became the religious group, and then the nation group, and now where will we extend it next? To all of each other, and then we'll stop war. So then we talked about empathy means feeling with another person, and compassion is desiring to help relieve and support the relief of their suffering. This, how to be a lion, with assertion, I will fix. And we talked about forgiveness is dropping the coal, but not dropping the wisdom, and that forgiveness heals the body, improves the immune system. The scorpion and the frog story is about being willing to see clearly what you're dealing with and not turn it into something else. That people can and do change, and it's wise to be mindful that people act from the level of consciousness where they are. This is really a worthwhile video to watch if you're dealing with people being hurt by people who are not realizing what they're doing. The stages of grief and letting go that we go through, and that it's a process. We all sense when it's time to let go, and then some resources on how to let go and forgive from some excellent therapists that post things freely online. Letting go of grudges, How to Let Go of a Grudge by Christian Conte, How to Forgive When You Can't Forget by Marie Forleo, who did the book Everything is Figureoutable. And this is Katie Morton on tuning into being there for ourselves. Being there for ourselves. How to Forgive Yourself. That's another video. And this is George Sanders' speech about allowing ourselves to make mistakes. And then a short story about kindness, about cultivating more kindness within ourselves. And then finally, the kindness challenge. So thank you, everybody. It was good to see you. I appreciate you very much. And I'm excited to see you next week. Next week will be our last video lecture. Last one, last class of Zoom. Have a great day, everybody.